Hey, what's up? Chad, Grassroots Crypto. What's up, guys?
Jim.
Yeah,
Gee,
nothing.
man. Thanks for holding it down last week.
No problems, my friend. No problems at all.
Worse.
Yes, sir. Beautiful day. And yeah, you guys want to run through like all the recent stuff? We had a recent new version, right? Is that 122?
Yep, 122.
Yeah, you want to run through real quick and go through what's new in 122?
Yeah, sure. Just bringing up the thing here so I can remind myself. Um, 1 second. 122. All right. What's interesting? What's interesting? Boring, boring, boring. Some bug fixes, blah, 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 blah. Making some corrections around like EVM incident observations to help stop the double spend we saw last week. Bug fix for that.
Yeah, so I mean that's the same as we already do for Bitcoin, right? Where we
Right.
broadcast a transaction and we observe it instantly rather than waiting for it to be broadcast to the chain and then observing it later. So that stops. I don't know exactly how that works. How does it actually stop any issues with the double spend by observing it first and the outbound isn't sent again later?
Right. So like effectively how the double spend worked was that we would schedule an outbound, right, with the gas amount that was correct at the time. And then right when we schedule the outbound, some huge like event happens on Ethereum which caused the gas to be like, skyrocket 5x larger. So then the nodes sign and broadcast the transaction, but it doesn't get put into a block anytime soon. It takes about 45 minutes for that transaction to be pushed into one of the blocks. And the network will every 300 or every 30 minutes, if it doesn't see the outbound transaction, makes the assumption that initial Asgard is not going to send it out for one reason or another because nodes are offline or something's up. Something's not right, but it's not doing the thing it's supposed to be doing. So we're going to reschedule to a different Asgard. And at that time, we reevaluate the gas required to send out the transaction at that time, right, to kind of up it. So if gas is too much, you can't actually send the transaction, then it'll just reschedule it with a new gas amount and then carry on like nothing happened. So just the timing of it is that we had to broadcast a transaction. It doesn't get put into the block for like a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is. We reschedule to another Asgard, and before both transactions are broadcast into the mempool before any one of them is committed to the chain in order to get to that scenario. So the fix is that whenever we make an observation of an outbound transaction, the network will delay an additional 30 minutes to reschedule, right? So if you make, 2 outbound observations, then you'll do it in I think it's like an hour and a half or something like this. So when we sign a transaction through an Asgard, and there's 12 members that are part of that signature, those 12 members will then make an observation like, hey, I signed this, I broadcast this, here's the outbound, there you go. Don't worry about rescheduling it, because I've already kind of shown you that I've produced a signature and I broadcast it onto the chain and just waiting to get onto the block. So that will delay the rescheduling by about 6-ish hours or so, about 6 hours. So by the time that reschedule actually does happen, I'm sure the transaction, would have gotten onto the chain, and at that point everything would have been fine.
Cool. So yeah, that stops the issue for the double spend, hopefully. Well, kind of makes it less likely to happen. You would need to not get that transaction onto a block the next 6 hours, which seems fairly unlikely.
Yep. Yeah, very unlikely. But
especially overspending on gas like we do.
Right. I think at this point, though, there's a lot of push on the dev side to start moving away from features and major features, and just move towards reliability, stability, and decentralization and these kind of concepts. And so there's been a push amongst the devs for that this quarter. Now that we've shipped, major features like lending and streaming swaps and savers and all these kind of major things, just to spend a few months or the rest of the calendar year to focus on making improvements to the protocol that aren't really sexy or exciting, but they're going to make the protocol more reliable, more stable, and hopefully more decentralized as well.
Yeah, and I think everything that's gone on the past couple weeks, it just makes it more, people understand the importance of all those things. Just the huge increase in volume, showing some deficiencies in TSS signing time with a huge outbound queue going on during some of the highest volume days,
mm-hmm.
and things like that. So yeah. So definite push towards just reliability, stability, decentralization during Q4 rather than getting the newest, sexiest features out. Not that there won't be any new sexy features coming out, but
yeah, we'll see. I'd like to see at least one feature launched in this quarter, or maybe 2, whatever, if we can get around to it. But I think immediately there's a handful of issues, about 12 of them or so that I can remember off the top of my head, that are focused around improving the reliability of the network in general, and there's going to be a lot of focus over the next couple months or so just to get these things rolled out to improve the speed, performance, scalability, reliability, all these things.
Yep, and TSS being one of the big focuses there, especially because that's been shown to be kind of a weak point.
Yeah, I would honestly say that TSS is probably the most fragile component to the stack as a whole. It's the most thing that fails the most frequently, and it's okay because it's able to recover in all scenarios. So it's not it's a huge deal, but obviously we prefer things to be reliable and stable versus being able to rework itself to be functional at the end. So we'll be probably putting together kind of a TSS task force in the next few days with a handful of devs to just devote a big amount of time and energy into researching the TSS related issues, trying to figure out what are the root causes of these things, how can we solve these problems, how do we get things to be much more reliable and better in the near future.
Cool. Yeah, I've been seeing a bunch of housekeeping stuff too, just like removing old code and things that aren't really used anymore, like deprecated things like the old Yggdrasil
Yep.
vaults or just like old methods and stuff that just aren't used anymore. So just kind of like a lot of cleanup
Yep.
stuff going
A lot
on.
of cleanup stuff, a lot of like house cleaning things. Again, nothing too sexy, but just good things for the health of the protocol.
Yeah, 100%. So did you want to talk about like Mimir V2 at all? Because I know that you had some ideas and like a early implementation of Mimir V2. So maybe we should just run through that and like kind of go through just the entire like overhaul of the Mimir thing. Maybe it's like starting with the history of like the you know
Mm-hmm.
what is Mimir and like
Yeah.
why it started and like what it's become, and then like I guess where we're thinking about taking it.
Right. So the initial concept of Mimir was an ability for devs to be able to make configuration changes, not protocol changes, but configuration changes, in a way that allowed us to have some small and restrained form of control over the protocol in the early days, right? Capabilities, limited capabilities, but for us to be able to roll out, a brand new blockchain, single chain KSN as it was back then, and be able to pause trading or pause LPing or pause bonding, whatever, in the event that there's some sort of bug or exploit or something severe where funds at risk or something of this nature, or the protocol's at risk of some form. And so that was created, this thing called Mimir. And the name Mimir came from a character in Norse mythology. It's a character that at the end of the story, of his story, Mimir gets his head chopped off, and I think Odin carries it around in a bed of flowers or something like this. And so that was the reason why we chose Mimir, because it was always intended from the get-go to be a temporary thing. It was something that we wanted to make sure we had kind of some capabilities in the early days to be able to maintain the network for while it's still kind of the code's being hardened and proving itself, and we can fix things if things come up. And we have used that capability as a dev team many times over the last few years, and it's been very helpful to be able to pause churning or something like this when it's appropriate to do so. And I think we've been talking about Mimir V2. We actually, before we get into that, we went to Mimir V1 with node control, I think a year later, where we wanted to give nodes the actual control at the end of the day, that they have the ability to override whatever Mimir admin configures. Like the nodes can come together and just resume trading or something like this. In the end, it's the nodes that always have full control over the protocol. Mimir admin just gave the ability for the dev team to make kind of quick changes quickly, but they only actually last if the network or the nodes agree with it. And that's what Mimir node Mimir came from, to kind of give nodes that kind of full control at the end of the day. And so we've been talking about Mimir V2 for well over a year, internally. There's some GitLab issues from over a year ago, and we started talking about it again a few months ago. I think it was in August, I want to say mid-August or something like this. And we just kind of talked about the idea of well, maybe it's the network's been out for a long time. We're now at mainnet. We've seen a lot of things. The network's getting increasingly more stable with time. But we also don't want to kill it entirely, because the ability to configure the networks, because you never know when there's a bug, you never know when there's an exploit, you never know when there's something going to happen, or some even not even relating to THORChain, some other chain like Bitcoin Cash or whatever could have some sort of major problem. We need to be able to pause things for that chain, for example, even if it's not even something that a change that we had made right on the product. So we started talking about Mimir V2 again a few months ago. It's been an ongoing conversation for well over a year, but we started talking again a few months ago and talked about implementation details and how this would look and blah, blah, blah. And one of the goals was to remove Mimir admin from the protocol entirely, and to give the nodes basically the ability for node Mimir. And so the new version of Mimir V2 is controlled entirely by the validators of the network, right? Nobody else has any kind of special rights or permissions. It's just nodes at the end of the day who control anything and everything has to do with the protocol. And so what's different, though, is that there's going to be two different types of Mimirs in V2, whereas now it's just one type. And this new type is going to be either an economic Mimir or an operational Mimir, right? And so an economic Mimir is kind of something that is a configuration of the network that defines the network's behavior, right? Like, for example, the emission curve would be a good example, like how fast rune is emitted from reserve. We could configure all sorts of things via the economical mirror, but the things that would be operational would be things that would be like, enabling or disabling features or trading or chains or, managing the cap on, lending or the cap on something else. And so like the operational aspects of like how we, control the different components, but not the overall behavior of the network itself. The overall behavior would be managed by economic mirrors. So, but the difference between those two things in terms of how they're controlled is that economic mirror requires a 2/3 majority of the nodes to change the consensus. So the economic mirror is set to something right now, and if nodes want to increase that number or decrease that number or whatever, they have to get a 2/3 consensus of all the nodes, all the active nodes, to make that change, right? Those are intended to be hard numbers that are not easy to change. They are numbers that you generally don't want to change unless it's really a significant change that you really want to make. That is a lasting change. Operational mirror is a little bit different though. That one requires it's a simple majority of of nodes who have voted, right? With a minimum number of votes, has to be 3 on any side that wins this kind of voting battle. So in the state of an operational mirror, let's just take trading for example. And at the beginning of the moment, nobody has voted in any direction on trading. It's just like everybody's sitting in a neutral position because nobody's voted yet on this particular topic. Then let's just say something happens, there's some bug that happens or whatever, for some reason to pause. 3 nodes can come together and vote to pause trading, in which case trading would be paused at that moment until you get 3 nodes that tie it or a 4th node that go to resume trading, right? So it's like whatever number of votes whatever side gets the most votes basically wins, right? In a simple way to put it. So that would be pretty much done by by the devs and by the operators whoever's running the nodes, like 9 runs some nodes, for example. So they might use those nodes to help kind of manage the network and be able to pause things when they really need to. And then, and if the community disagrees with the pausing of trading, for example, instead of getting a 2/3 consensus, which is what you needed before, or right now that's true, you can just have 4 nodes and vote against it, right? And then somebody can vote a 5th on the trading side and a 6th on the non-trading side, and like you can get into a kind of a battle or a war between sides to determine what the actual behavior of the network will be. But these operational things do not change actual like incentives. It doesn't change rewards. It doesn't change anything like that. It just changes whether or not some feature is enabled or disabled, or the cap of that feature is what cap that is at. That make sense?
Yeah. So essentially, things like the incentive curve, like the max rune supply,
Yep.
and other things that are basically never changed, but are still set through Mimir are economic constants that it requires a majority to change,
Yep.
and those are likely to probably never be touched. But like obviously, it needs an entire majority in order to change those things. And then the operational Mimirs are the things that are flipped on a more regular basis, like things like pausing trading, pausing like LP actions on any particular chain,
Yep.
and that just requires a simple majority of votes.
Right.
So most people have like a nil vote, and then once 3 nodes vote in one direction, they can pause trading. So essentially, it opens up like the functionality of the admin Mimir. It kind of like socializes it a bit to all the nodes and just says like, hey, anyone can do this as long as you have like this amount of voting power, and then anyone can essentially veto that with the appropriate number of votes in the other direction.
Right. And
it maintains the power to be able to keep the network safe and like be able to respond to threats, but also not be subject to any like individual that has like the ability to do that.
Right. It puts less reliance or less expectations, I guess, in some sense, on the devs to maintain the network, and makes it more readily available for anybody. if the devs had to step aside for some reason or whatever, or they just all got hit by a bus, who knows? Like the rest of the community has the ability to kind of take things over, and they surely will at times. Basically, like take the recent Gaia fork we just saw, yesterday I think it was, where like we had to pause trading, pause LPs, and there's a kind of a process to pause Gaia, let them fork, let them fix their stuff, make sure it's all stable and reliable, and they're not into a bad case or bad scenario. And once it's all ready, we can go ahead and resume, trading on that chain, stuff like that. So like I think for all of time of the protocol, there's always gonna be situations where we're gonna need operational Mimirs to be able to pause trading, like at the Gaia fork, for example. And that's just going to be a thing of just how we manage the network into the future, that somebody's going to have to do it. But I think it's much better and much more decentralized to say that the community can do it. The devs can do it too if they're available on these kind of things. But if they were not available, the community can do it too.
Right, but there's no distinction. It's just anyone that runs a node. Well, you need 3 anyway in order to change any kind of constant if you're one operator. But it makes it so any node can change any of those permissions, but not in an oppressive way where it's like they can change things like the incentive curve or the rune supply or like the lending lever and like things that that you would want everyone to agree upon before doing it, not things that would need like a quick action, like like pausing trading or something.
Right, and even if 3 nodes came together to be malicious, and they decided, we're just going to pause trading because YOLO. Then if they don't, like, you just make relay to describe to the rest of the community of like why they made that decision, if there's something something's up or not or whatever, and they can't defend themselves, then 4 nodes can get together and vote against them, and that can resume it, right? Or the network, even more extreme scenarios, the nodes of the network can go ahead and ban those 3 individuals who voted to pause trading. They can actually kick them out of the network through a ban process, which we never actually used that particular tool before in our history. Not that I can remember, at least. But in extreme scenarios, I guess you could just kick those 3 guys out if they are being malicious and carry on like nothing happened.
How does that actually work? So can it just you just need a 2/3 majority and you ban that operator and they just get their bond back, or like how can you ban an operator?
Yeah, it's basically that. Like it costs money to the validator who's asking to ban them. Like it costs some amount of money. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's not cheap because it should be used pretty sparingly. It should not be a commonly utilized tool. But once you get to a 2/3 majority of the network kind of chooses to ban this particular individual, this node, the network would then like immediately reject them from the network, and so they're no longer able to commit blocks anymore, and they probably won't participate in TSS key signs and that kind of stuff, which is fine because you don't need 100% of people. You just need 2/3 of an Asgard, so it's not a big deal there. I think one thing I would like to change about the behavior of that, and I just never got around to changing it because it seemed like low priority, was that like the cost of banning somebody to, like, if I want to ban Cow, for example, if I'm one of the nodes, and let's just say I have to spend like $10,000 with the rune to ban him, and then once Cow gets banned by a 2/3 majority, I get my $10,000 back from his bond, so that he pays the price rather than me paying the price, right? So if you can get 2/3 to agree, then everybody should get their rune reward back, and then it gets taken from Cow's bond. I think that's where I'd like to change it. But I've been thinking about that thing for a long time, and just never got around to prioritizing because it just seemed like low level priority.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, something that's probably, hopefully it never happens, right? Because the only reason why that would actually happen is because a node is acting like maliciously towards the network. Like there's no other reason why you'd want a particular validator to be banned.
Right. It's pretty hard to get in a situation like that. I think one scenario could be that, like, a realistic scenario is, assuming a non-malicious scenario, is that if that node is like completely broken and completely offline and never come online again, if the whole thing got nuked for some reason, and you don't want that node to participate in the next key sign, or a key gen rather, like it should be ejected. If that operator like got shot shot in the head or hit by a bus, or whatever, and he didn't actually do a leave command, the network would try to like keep that node in the network, right, in the next keygen, right? But if that one's just like offline, not signing anything, not doing anything, he's racking slash points, and if he didn't get enough slash points, he's getting kicked out of the next churn. Then the nodes can come together and say, this guy is like completely offline the last like 2.5 days, but he's like causing keygens to fail. Let's go ahead and ban that person, which would immediately eject him from the network at that moment, and he wouldn't be a part of the next keygen or the next churn attempt. I guess that's one hypothetical scenario, but that's kind of why we created it to begin with, to have this ability. Is like it's kind of like a last ditch effort or last resort, that if there's something extreme happening, like somebody's holding the network hostage some way, through the keygen process or whatever like this, when we can't churn at all because this one fucking asshole, there's always this ban ability just to like punt him from the network just as a last ditch, like, backstop if there's some extreme case happens in the scenario. But I don't think we've ever actually needed anything like it before, but it's just there just in case.
Yeah, and even so, it still seemed unlikely that like a node would try and do anything malicious to the like to the network through the new Mimir. Even though like if they were a multi-node operator, it's possible they could try and pause trading, but then if they're doing it for no reason, then others aren't going to like that.
Right. So they have to like defend themselves, and I think as long as they make a reasonable defense, I don't think people would get pissy about it if you think there's an actual reason to do so. But if you're just doing it because, like, I don't know, you just want to be a dick about it, then I think people might get pissy and they might choose to ban you. In fact, the actual fee that nodes pay to ban you is also Mimired. So nodes could vote to change the fee and then vote to ban you at basically no cost.
Right. Well, that would be an economic constant.
Yes, that would be an example of an economic constant for sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I really like the idea of like just separating it into economic and operational. Like it makes total sense, and like it's going to be good for the actual decentralization of the network. And that's the final step towards planned obsolescence, is just getting rid of the admin Mimir. So this is kind of the final step of just like the the network is just in the hands of the node operators, and that's just the way that it goes indefinitely.
Right. And we just have to be careful about like what which Mimirs are operational, because if you give them too many or the wrong ones, most person could use those operational Mimirs to like manipulate something or whatever. Like to give you an example, would be like if operational Mimir could just arbitrarily pick any pool to be part of the Tor anchor, right? Like you just remove all the stable coins and just add Bitcoin as the anchor for the Tor price. You could use that to price manipulate and open up a huge loan and profit a huge amount and blah blah blah. Like that would obviously be bad. So it's like you have to be careful that whatever operational limits we do create, that we have to study them closely to make sure that a malicious operator couldn't utilize those in some way to personally gain from the system. If there is an ability to do that, then it has to be a 2/3 majority, like economic Mimir.
Yeah, I'm assuming that most things would be an economic Mimir that would require a full majority, because it's like most things don't really need to be flipped on or off or changed all that often. And if they do, then it's probably good to have a consensus for it. It'd really just be the things that admin Mimir is used for today, which is either turning on like a new feature that like might need to be flipped off, or just like stopping things
Right.
for a little bit.
Right. Exactly.
So
yeah,
just kind of like just separating the line there. So I would assume that most things would actually be economic Mimirs, not operational.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's like, there'd probably only be a dozen or so that would be operational. The vast majority, the other 100 would probably be closer to be economic.
Yeah, I wonder what you think about like I kind of just had this idea a little bit ago, but it's not really that important. But things like how we sometimes nodes do like symbolic votes of things, just to do like an on-chain vote for like ADRs and things like that. I wonder if that makes sense to include as like a third type, where it's like it does absolutely nothing, but it's not like clogging up operational Mimirs or economic ones, just to like have some kind of on-chain voting mechanism for just an ADR, or just like a chain vote, or like whatever.
Yeah. I thought about that idea of including a third type, would be like a vote type, which is just, doesn't actually do anything to the protocol. It just kind of expresses an intention or a viewpoint. And I ended up not doing it just because Node Mimir v1 could still exist, right? In the sense that it's able to express arbitrary ideas, but it doesn't have any ability to change behavior of the protocol. So you might be able to vote for Mimir v1 and say, I vote to enable something, or whatever. I want the next chain to be, dash, I don't know, whatever, right? But it doesn't actually change any of the behavior of the network. It doesn't actually cause any actual fundamental changes.
Cool. If people want to come up and like ask questions about any of this stuff, you can. I think one person raised their hand, but they're back down now. So if anyone would like to like just get a better view or just like ask a question about what's going on here, we are totally available.
Yeah, people are welcome to come up if you have any questions about this or anything else for that matter.
So yeah, then that's the last thing towards planned obsolescence, and then it's like everything is pretty much done. So like it's gonna be a good time. Because I know that people have been like I've definitely like seen comments, people asking about like update, and this is it basically.
Yep.
There's nothing left to do after this. Obviously, there's things to be done to increase the decentralization and just stability of the network. But
yep.
This is the last step towards like the planned obsolescence of the original dev team.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still like to see, as a part of the original dev, I'd still like to see some other like major things planned. Like I want to see memless transactions. I want to see limit orders, maybe perpetuals. We're still kind of brainstorming on that one, but that there is going to come a day at some point in the not too distant future when we there's no major features left to build. I mean, there's always optimizations and tweaks and improvements to be made, but there's no like huge major features to be built because we built everything under the sun.
Yo, Nirvana, what's up?
Hey guys, when streamers for loans?
Yeah, so streams for loans, we got, was it part of 121? We were waiting for a little while for like all this like massive trade volume to kind of die down before we make like new changes to the protocol while huge volumes going through. It just didn't seem like it made sense at that time to do it. So we just kind of let the kind of volume pass through and kind of die down on its own. And then I think it was yesterday we enabled the dynamic anchor concept, which is all towards streaming loans. If you didn't do the dynamic anchor thing first before streaming loans, like the amount of streaming swaps you could have would be like just like either 0 or like 2, one or 2, which would not be all that useful at that level. So we got that done yesterday. So far, it's looking good. I'm just keeping my eye on the dashboard, making sure that the graph looks legitimate. And so far, it looks pretty good. The next part is enabling streaming savers because that's the simpler of the two. Streaming savers is a little bit simpler than streaming loans.
Streaming loans. Yeah.
So that's the next one, which I was kind of waiting for Eric Danis on this one because he was part of that. Part of the team that built that feature, so I kind of want him to be on board and watching it with us when we actually flip that switch, which could be either tomorrow or maybe early next week. Once that gets going and that one's like sailing, everything looks good with that one. I think we can probably then enable streaming loans, which will probably be mid next week. I'm gonna guess.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at the new dynamic outbound. Sorry, I keep forgetting what this thing is called because the name is kind of unintuitive. The the dynamic pool depths or whatever that basically changes the derived asset pool depths. Yeah, it looked good except for I guess there's one like little bug with BNB that's causing the BNB depth to be really low because because that's the only pool where there's BNB for one chain and then BNB for another chain. So it's like iterating over itself for like the beacon chain, and then it does it again for the smart chain over the same derived asset pool. So I think it's just like one thing needs to be fixed. Probably not important for probably not that important and necessary to get it out, but like because everything else looks good, just that one thing with BNB.
Well, yeah. So like the BNB derived asset pool is like not being utilized at all right now because the only pools you can actually swap with is the Tor one, Bitcoin, and ETH. And so the BNB is not even being utilized at all, so it doesn't actually really matter if that's in good standing or not. But well, I'm sure we'll be pushing out a release in 120.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't matter if you took that out as a debt asset,
right?
Would it? Because that wouldn't even matter because you're already out of derived assets by the time you get to the BNB.
Right. So we'll fix it, I'm sure, in like probably 123 or whatever. But for right now, it doesn't even matter. So it's just the network's being confused because there's two BNB assets of the same BNB asset on two different chains, which is just confusing the math of it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and then streaming savers, and then streaming lending.
Hell yeah. And then we can start working on Mimir v2 and other kind of like reliability things, just improve the stability of the network. I think that's the next thing for the next quarter or so. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything that gets in Q4, I definitely like Memoless just because I think it gives us a big advantage for integrations, especially because then integrators don't really have to think about the wallet context at all. Like all they'll have to do is plug into an API that'll just generate the right amount to send and where to send it to, like, without having to think about like, hey, we need like to hook up a Bitcoin wallet to this Ethereum dApp or like whatever. They're not going to need to think about that. All they're going to need to do is just plug into the API and then just say like, here's a QR code, scan it, send the coins, and then whatever you want it to do is like going to happen. So yeah, it's like that's one thing that I would really like to see.
I'd be very fascinated to see how much trade like volume that a UI like that would get. Like that doesn't have to do a full integration. They can just go to a website and click it in, or even it might be even used as like a kind of a gateway drug in some sort of like, hey, I can get quick and easy integration, THORChain integration into my multi-chain wallet without doing like the full thing, and have them just do the quick and easy one, which is just like an API call and then send it. And then once they kind of tasted the drug a little bit, and like kind of wanted a better experience and wanted blah blah blah, and give better quotes and whatever else, like they could actually do a full integration and be even more reliable, I suppose. But it might be used as like a good kind of a gateway drug to get more UIs to wallets and DEXs to integrate.
Yeah, I think from the concept of like a single chain dApp that's active right now. Like if you're one of those, you're just never going to go through the headache of like figuring out how to do all the Bitcoin stuff.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
For your intent, because all your users are on Ethereum, like blah blah. It just doesn't make any sense. And even multi-chain, there's plenty of like Wormhole, Axelar. They both have these widgets that they ship out to sites, and they're like swap widgets, right? But they just connect to the major wallets. And what major browser wallet does Bitcoin besides XDeFi, which is a fraction of the size of the EVM ones that they all hook up to currently. So being able to just have the you just do the Bitcoin thing and just scan the code and do it, like super easy to get that in, rather than being like, hey, by the way, you need to figure out like how to do a Bitcoin wallet connection, and like it's never going to happen. Like it just doesn't make any sense for them to put resources into doing that when they could do something just like scanning a QR code. So
yeah, I remember I saw Plan B of that kind of fame of that chart he created. I'm now blanking on the name of it, but he was tweeting about this like a few months ago. Like, why can't I just trade on THORChain by just like going to some website and plugging what I want and just give me an address and send it? Like, he literally described Memoless transactions inadvertently, and I was like, yeah, we're literally building that right now.
Yeah, definitely the nicest quality of life thing that's going to happen. And then interfaces like DoorSwap, like Shapeshift, they're just going to be completely wallet agnostic. It's going to be like you just type what you want to do, it'll show a QR code, and then like you just do the thing,
Right.
and then it's done. It doesn't even matter what wallet you're using. So,
Right.
and that's what's going to be really cool. Like, I could see as like a new user being like really liking that experience. So like it's probably going to take a while to get down. That's why I'm like hoping that we get it shipped out sooner rather than later, because obviously the sooner you can get started on integrations, like these things take like super long time to actually get going. So like the quicker they actually get started, the quicker we can actually wrap them up and get a product shipped out and have people start using it.
Right. Right. All right. Anything else from the community? Questions, concerns? Q&A? Ask me anything? AMA?
I mean, there's no shortage of things you could build on THORChain. I know that you're kind of at the end of like, hey, like we're kind of nearing like feature completeness here, but I still got a ton of ideas of things that I would love to do. I feel like I need to learn like Go or something like that, and just like just build these things or something.
Well, there's always more to build for sure. One of the things I would like to see happen, and may never happen, but I think it'd be interesting, would be the ability for THORChain to send assets on THORChain to contracts, smart contracts on other chains. So if you wanted to be like an LP of like the Bitcoin pool, for example, and then you wanted to take your LP units and like transfer them to a smart contract on like Osmosis or a smart contract on Ethereum or a layer 2 maybe, and transfer your liquidity units to a smart contract, and then that smart contract can then like do anything they want with it. Like they could make a gambling game out of it. They could do trading. They could do NFT stuff. Like who knows? It could be arbitrarily anything. So that would give like smart contract ability on top of THORChain, but not on THORChain. It's on any blockchain that has smart contracting on it would be supported.
Yeah, I feel like the most interesting use for that would be just like a DAO or something like that. Like people pooling together funds and doing that together through some kind of smart contract.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, you can do a DAO out of it for sure. A lot of things you can do with it. It's just like becomes this kind of open-ended way of developing on top of THORChain, using our assets, our derived assets, or synthetics, or LP units, the Rune asset itself. You can transfer all these things to a smart contract, and it's pretty simple to do too. It's like not that complex.
Cool. Anyone else want to come up, or is there other stuff you guys want to talk about today? THORSwap is back up, so congrats to the team for actually like, getting that stuff out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Good to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure that was it's been a harrowing time for them, for sure. Rough time, but they've handled it pretty well. I think overall, I think they've done a pretty good job. And so I congratulate them and I welcome them back to the fold.
Yep, back to business.
Back to business.
I can say that, from what I understand, ledger transactions now work on AsgardX after some non-realm infrastructure changes. So that should be good. The 403 shouldn't happen anymore.
Yep.
Sweet. I've been seeing some nice like uptick of activity for like AsgardX too. So like I love to see that as well, like some more diversity in interfaces and things.
It's good. This is why you have multiple interfaces. There's no official interface for THORChain. There's many different ways. So if one or two goes down, there's still plenty of options.
Right. That's the way to go, really.
Yeah, you don't even need an interface if you're a bit more tech savvy, but interfaces just really make it easier.
Yeah,
that's all.
Absolutely. I've always been a big fan of AsgardX. I've always liked it from the beginning because I always liked the idea of like running my own UI like locally and not be on some website that can be turned off or the domain can be, reacquired by some ICANN or whatever the hell it is, and like it's just much more decentralized to be able to run your own stuff yourself without relying on other people to run it for you.
Yeah, and it's open source. You can see the code, and what I like is your key store staying on your machine.
Right.
You're not uploading your key store and password to a website.
Right. Right.
Um,
The one thing that AsgardX is missing, though, from a decentralization perspective, is that its infrastructure is reliant on, I think, 9realms to run Bitcoin daemons and Thornode daemons and all these things to fetch information and push information to. That's the one thing it's kind of missing, is it's just a way for it to interact with those systems without a centralized entity of some kind.
I totally agree. I've got a node running now, a full node. I'm just having issues with Midgard. The thing's falling over, but in the future, that's the idea, is for us to run a node, and then that way we can direct all the traffic to the node, or at least have a backup, so we're not dependent on 9realms like we have been before.
Right.
Because if they throttle more and said, "Oh, that's it, we're no longer public access," we're in a bit of trouble. And ThoughtSwap run their own infrastructure. I think Lens might run their own infrastructure. Other people run their own infrastructure. Like this is the future.
Yeah.
You can't be reliant.
This is exactly the thing that Archeo is trying to build now, is that decentralized infrastructure, node infrastructure, so that people can offer, Bitcoin data or Thornode data or Midgard data, whatever it is, and then if anyone got censored or whatever it is, you can always just flip to somebody else. It's like it's so small and simple and quick to be able to change from one provider to another that it becomes really hard to attack in some ways.
So, question: are the node operators if you had a list of all the IPs, which I think you might be able to get, can you use other nodes just to query, like go through an array and just iterate through that to get data?
Are you talking about on Archeo, or are you talking about on THORChain's nodes?
On THORChain.
Yeah, no, the validators of the network don't actually run Thor nodes publicly. I mean, they run it locally, but they don't run it publicly, and that's largely to avoid DOS attacks on the validators themselves. Like reading data and saving data, like reading and writing data, should probably never be done on validators directly themselves, because it just opens them up to another kind of area of attack. And instead, you run full nodes and you read and write data from those instead of the actual validator set.
Right. Because obviously, if I set one up, I've got an IP, then if that gets exposed, everyone can just DDoS that one.
Right.
That's the concern there.
Right.
So then it becomes like, if you're on your own node, you got to protect it somehow.
Right. And protecting a full node is a lot easier than protecting a validator node, or certainly a lot less at risk. Because if you DOS enough validators, at the same time, you could potentially stop block production theoretically, right? Which is why we don't expose those ports publicly. Yeah. Even the P2P ports that are open, like those can be configured to be just between the validator sets, like those IP addresses specifically, rather than the open public. So, but full nodes, if you can DOS the hell of those things, and then you're not really having any effect on the protocol itself, which is why you do it.
Yeah. Well, the DDoS on 9realms didn't really affect the network.
Right.
It just caused inconvenience.
Right.
Yes, that's what I'm working on at the moment. Trying to get Midgard to work, and then probably update the documentation and do a video.
Yep.
So
this is something that I really like to see happen, because this is what I'm working on Archeo too. Is that like the node infrastructure is one component of it. I think AsgardX has got the equation partially right, in the sense that you're building desktop applications that you can download. And once you download it, it's yours, right? It can't be turned off. You don't forced to upgrade to a new version like a website typically is. Like whenever a website updates a version, like they update it for you as well, and you have no choice but to use the newest version. Whereas what's great thing about the desktop version is that not only are you not utilizing any domains that can be, spoofed or attacked or phished or turned off or any of these things, you're just running it all locally, which is just yours, your position for all of time. But you can maintain your version if you want to. If you come up with a new version of AsgardX coming out tomorrow, and for whatever reasons I just don't like it because I don't like this new feature, or I think it's got something I just really don't like, then I can just choose to stay on the version I'm at and continue to use that for as long as I want to. right? And I think one of the viewpoints of Archeo, like in the long term, is that like we build this kind of desktop application that becomes like an app store. And so you can, install the AsgardX, you can install the THORSwap, you can install the Uniswap, you can install the, insert random UI here, DUIDX, whatever the hell it's going to be. And you can just like run them all locally and complete running it in a completely like self hosted way, and never have to worry about US updating things underneath you or anything like this.
Like an Umbrel app package or something like that, app store, Umbrel.
Yeah. Actually, the protocol itself would actually use BitTorrent as the methodology of sharing packages. Like so, AsgardX comes with a new version. You just share it via BitTorrent, and the application will find the new version. Say, hey, do you want to upgrade to the new version or something like this? And then you literally download it from the community. So there's not even a centralized server where all these packages are being stored. It's really just being passed through BitTorrent as the methodology of like sharing it. So everybody who downloads the new version of AsgardX on this new application would then become a sharer and share it for other people to download it as well. And you're relying solely on your own community to be able to utilize these applications, which is a much better approach.
Yeah, it's cool. And then like you said, you sit on your own. It's just like if you're on a node for like a Bitcoin node, you can decide whether you want to upgrade and maybe you don't upgrade straight away. Maybe you wait one or two versions just to see if there's any issues.
Yep.
You've got a bit more control, but you get told there's an update, but it's your choice to actually accept that or not.
Right. That's an important component of decentralization, is the ability to choose which version you want to use. If you don't have that, then somebody else is enforcing upon you what code you execute. And if somebody else is enforcing upon you what code you execute, well, then it's not yours, it's theirs. And they're telling you what to use. And that becomes a problem for decentralization.
Yeah, well, because then, someone can put some exploit or something in the code.
Sure.
And then it's pushed. Exactly. You don't want that.
There was an exploit on, I want to say it was, what's the name of that one? I can't remember the name of it right now, but the attacker had like inserted some sort of like JS bug or exploit into their CDN. And so everybody was going to the website to use, I think it was Badger, I think it was, or something like this. And so they, lost a huge amount of money because of just some, CDN hosted exploit, which is obviously highly problematic. But with this particular design, there's no ability to do that at all. Everything is cryptographically signed. Everything is checksummed. There's no ability to insert new code other than what was written and already validated. All apps that are on the Archeo network are all open source and verifiable by anybody and everybody to validate all the code works as it is. And in fact, none of these applications have any ability to access the general internet at all. Everything that happens outside of itself into the general internet has to go through channeled hardware. Not hardware, but channeled ports locally on your computer that connects you to specific providers of data. So you can't actually even get like fished to sign transactions, on Ethereum or something like this, because the only way you can sign a transaction is when it's prompt on your device on the UI itself to go ahead and sign it, rather than something being signed for you. It can't actually broadcast transactions for you unless it has permission to.
That's cool.
It's all about.
When's
I was going to say it's all about just much better privacy, much better security, much more decentralization. Like the way the internet should have been built from the get-go in many respects. When's
V1 coming out?
Quite a while, to be honest with you. It's taking much longer to do V1 than I would have liked. The code's been ready for a while, like for like months now, but we're stuck in testnet, and we're just trying to get people to help validate some of the basic functionalities of the service. And it's like, it just seems like people aren't incentivized to do it. Like they want to be validators and that kind of stuff, but they don't want to be data providers or challenged like being test being a DApp themselves, because it's just like they have other things on their to-do list, and it's just like low priority. So it's kind of hard to get people to get there, like actually kick the tires.
Well, I'll have a note up for a while, so Yours, let me know.
Yeah. Once we actually launch this thing, like even just the infrastructure side of it, like the UI ideas and we were just talking about, that's like phase 2. Phase 1 is just the infrastructure. But once you launch that part and go to mainnet, like AsGardX should give it a good look, because get off of the Nine Realms T in a sense, and get onto a different system that is much more decentralized and much more in the control of the user, so that they have much more self-sovereignty if they choose.
Cool.
Brought up Param 2020. What's up? If anyone else would like to come up and say anything. Param, you there?
Guess not.
All right, I'm bringing up Dormaxian. Hey, what's up?
Hey, couple questions about bond providing. First one was just a very, basic bond providing 101 question. If you, match up, find somebody on Discord or whatever that has a slot open for bond providing, then presumably they have to whitelist you for a certain address that you deposit to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you know that that address is like a legit bond providing address and not just their, newly created trust wallet address that you're sending it into or something?
Sorry, are you asking from the node operator perspective, or are you asking from the bond provider's perspective?
From the bond provider's address, it seems a little scary to just like, somebody gave me an address of where to send all my rune. Let me just send it off there and hope it's a legit address, right?
Okay, so you don't actually send any rune when you are a bond provider.
Okay.
Never send a rune to a node operator or anybody else. Like never do that. So what you do is you do a message deposit, which is a type of transaction. It's like so instead of sending it directly to them, you send it to the network. You send it to the module, right? Through a message deposit. So you don't actually, like, the node operator never should take custody of your funds.
Sure.
So don't ever send it to the node operator. So even if you like completely messed it up or something and they gave you like a wrong address or something like that, you wouldn't lose anything. You just get it back because it would just be an invalid address. So like that's the first thing, is don't ever like just send the funds. You just do a message deposit on like THORSwap or AsGardX, wherever you can bond.
Okay, so message deposit is different than a send.
Correct.
Yeah. So you don't send the rune to anywhere. It's a type of like depositing it into the module which holds all the bond. And that's just the type of thing. So if you go on like THORSwap or AsGardX and you go to like bond, it'll automatically do that message deposit transaction type for you. So you don't even need to like think about that or do anything with it. It just happens. But like, you don't ever have to send it. So there's no risk of like getting rugged as long as you're not sending the rune to just some random address and some guy's like, hey, send me all your stuff.
Right.
So let's say you go to THORSwap or to AsGardX, and just the fact that the wallet that you're going to use to send from connects, it will know what to do with it. Is that right?
Right. The only whitelisting is actually happening on the operator side. The operator has to whitelist your address, not the other way around.
Right. So you give them your public address for your Thor wallet.
They
and
whitelist
just
you,
connect that,
and then you go ahead and
you
bond
can't get
to
it
them.
wrong from there.
You can't get it wrong at all. It would just reject it if you got anything wrong from that point. It would just reject it. And so you would say, I'm going to bond to this operator, this node address, and then because you're whitelisted, it'll accept it. If you tried to bond to somebody else's node who didn't whitelist you, the whole thing would just reject it.
Just reject it, right?
Yeah.
So you do have to get a node address from the operator.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so when you go to bond, you just type in, like, it'll say like, what node are you bonding to, and you just type that in, and then you put in however much rune, and you can just do it from there. But it's not a send. You just deposit it into the. It's basically depositing it into the module, and then through that it says, oh, this is going to this bond provider, this node operator, and they whitelisted you, so then it's all good. It's pretty easy. So it's anywhere that you can bond, it'll automatically do the right transaction type for you. Just don't like, obviously this is not just for you, but for everyone. It's like, don't ever send like, even if you trust this person, don't just send rune or anything like that.
Except for me.
So it's more like
you can send me
than
rune,
a sending.
Yeah, as long as they have this exact profile picture on Twitter, that's the real Chad Barraford.
Don't do that. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
So once you do this successfully, then your balance will reduce in your own wallet, though. Of course,
Yeah, the wallet,
like
the
staking.
rune is actually moved from your wallet to a module, which basically is a wallet that's owned by the protocol that has no private key.
All right. Now, I think of, I don't know if it was the last one or at some point during one of these calls, there was a talk about the possibility, just very early, light bulb going off about the possibility of doing a sort of like a common protocol managed pool for bond providing.
Yep.
Is there any thoughts on that and
Yes,
what that would be?
we've been calling that a notion amongst the devs. We've been calling that like an auto bond. So where you're not really picking specifically which node to bond to. You just bond to the network as a whole, and the network just kind of auto fills you into places where you can fit. That may happen. That may not happen. To be honest with you, there's some good reasons to do it, and there's some good reasons not to do it. So I think in the end, I think it's going to really just take more time to validate the implementation and details.
Yeah, just seemed like one of those things. That and of course the ever persistent question from all of us plebs is, what about cold vaults or what else they were called? I don't know.
Yeah,
the storage,
cold vaults,
mini little storage nodes.
Yeah, cold vaults was thrown around at a time when security was low on the network, like we were kind of running out of security, and it was like stopping us from being able to like launch Binance Smart Chain on all this kind of stuff. And so we were trying to think of ideas of how to expand security. And there are benefits to doing that cold vaults versus an autobahn system. Like it's actually safer for the protocol to do it that way, to be honest. But now that security is relatively high, I think the most amount of bond we've ever had in history. There's less pressure or demand to spend resources on that kind of feature.
Yeah, gotcha. Is there anything about the huge amounts of volume and presumably if streaming lending works as intended, then the bond should only go up, right? Or the space for more savers and all of that flywheel should be kicking in? Or is it like we're going to hit another ceiling here if everything goes our way soon, where the pendulum's going to have to swing back to bonding again?
Possibly. I mean, I would never say that it only goes up from here. That's a little bit of a nonsensical statement, but if we were to launch streaming loans, and let's assume that those loans are successful in the sense of how often they're getting utilized, which that may or may not be true. It's kind of hard to know with the bear market, how much how much general interest there is, but that could cause some positive rune action potentially. I'm not saying it will cause it, but I'm just saying it's possible. In which case, that would obviously make the security of the network even more well endowed, in a matter of speaking. So we'll see. You never know until you actually do it.
Right. But you don't see any looming crisis as far as need to get more bond going at this moment, right?
No, I don't think so. The only looming crisis that I'm concerned about is that synth circuit breaker we were talking about a few weeks ago. It's nothing we have to deal with today or tomorrow. It's not a problem anytime soon for probably years to come. But it is something that I would like to see us kind of pin up and get it settled.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. All right, that's all I've got.
Yep.
Thanks. Good work.
Thanks.
All that. Yep.
Thanks. We'll just go in order here and get everyone through. Gray, what's up?
Yes, sir. So, quick question. Congratulations, by the way, so far with the project. I've been following the project for a few years now. I sort of invested early, but I lost touch of what's going on. So, I understand THORChain as DeFi on Bitcoin. And what I want to understand now is how is what stuff are doing related to what THORChain also is building? Is there in some way, some kind of integrations that in the future you'd see these things working together, or what's their relationship, or they're completely two different things? So it's more like a technical question a bit.
I'm not sure if I got that question. Did you get that, Kyle?
Yeah, sorry. Which two things are you talking about?
You know stacks on Bitcoin?
Oh, stacks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I'm just trying to understand what the relationship would be with
Between
stacks and THORChain. Are these completely two different things, or there is a integration in the future that you would see them working hand in hand as technologies, not as projects?
they are two different things run by two different teams, and they have very different philosophies of how to connect with Bitcoin. But I don't see a connection or integration there that I'm aware of that I can think of. I think they're off on their own view of the world, and we're on our view of the world, and I don't think those two match up too well. But I like Stack. Like they're one of the smarter teams. Like from a technical perspective, and their economics is better than most products out there. I'll tell you that right now.
Can you make me understand the difference between what you're doing and what they're doing exactly? Because I don't quite technically understand it.
Yeah, Stacks, if I remember correctly, and I hope I get it right, is that they are a side chain of Bitcoin, and they offer like smart contracting for Bitcoin, but they have to do. I can't remember if I'm mixing up with another one that sounds similar or not, but they do like something called like proof of transfer or something like this as a mechanism to move Bitcoin from one side to the other. It's just holistically a very different idea and design. I think they pull some of their security from the blocks being minted on the Bitcoin chain, but in the end, I think, and I hope I'm not misspeaking here because I'm not an expert on stacks. But in the end, it's just like it's still like a trusted federation, like most Bitcoin side chains tend to be.
Yeah, and THORChain is completely separate because it's not a Bitcoin L2, like Dax sort of is. THORChain is just a place, it's a decentralized exchange where we have native Bitcoin liquidities. You can trade Bitcoin for Ethereum or whatever other supported network. So it's kind of like two completely different purposes that are kind of like oblique to each other. Like Stack's more of a L2 sidechain type thing, and THORChain being a native asset exchange where you can trade Bitcoin for other assets on other networks. Thanks for your question, though. Quantum Ghost.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I just had a quick question. You guys ever think of adding XRP onto THORChain?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think my viewpoint on adding chains in general, and I think this applies to XRP as well, is that during a bear market, it's hard to add chains. Like we just added Bounty Smart Chain, and there was like basically no interest in it. Like there's not much liquidity, not much trade volume in it, and thus far it hasn't really been fruitful to the amount of cost that it took the devs to build it and then the nodes to operate those chains and so forth and so on. And I think that the reason why that is because this is not a feel the dream scenario where if we build it they will come. Just because we add some big blockchain with lots of liquidity and transactions like by Smart Chain or whatever doesn't mean any of that action is going to be coming towards THORChain. So my viewpoint these days is that I don't really care how much market cap there is in the chain. What I care most about is that team that's behind it, for it? Is the community behind it for it? Are they going to add liquidity? Are they going to integrate, THORChain into their wallets and their UIs and their ecosystems? And if I can get that agreement, which some chains are, like Radix, for example, is a chain that's like interested in doing those things. I'm much more interested in adding Radix than I am XRP. And that's not because I think Radix is better than XRP or vice versa, whatever. It has nothing to do with my viewpoints on the chain or the coin or any of these things. To me, it doesn't really matter what the coin is. Is that community down with the idea? Are they going to help? Are they going to assist? Are they going to be engaged? Are they going to come to spaces? Are they going to do some cross marketing? Are they going to do all these things to raise awareness? That's what I care most about more than anything. And XRP has not shown any interest in that regard. So in that regard, I would not be interested in XRP personally.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Made coins.
Yes, I'm here. It's a little bit noisy where I'm at. I just have a quick question. Um, I'm new on this podcast, THORChain. What do you guys see yourself at going into next year? Like, are you gonna do any like collaboration? Like, say for example, like I hear a lot about like Hedera H bar. Um, I just want to know more about your company. I'm actually looking it up right now on your website. So yeah, that's basically. I just want to know where you see your company going next year.
Well, the first thing is that we're not a company. There is no foundation. There is no corporate entity that exists anywhere in the world. So that's the first thing you should know. We're a decentralized group of developers and community members from across the planet. That's the first thing. Second thing is where we're going to go over the next year. I think the intention, at least the way that I look at it, is we're going to be working a lot with integrations. We've seen a lot of that in the last year with Trust Wallet and MetaMask and other kind of major wallets and dexes that are going to be integrating with us. I think that's one of the key components for our success is getting just integrated with as a default swapping mechanism for every major wallet that you can think of. That's one component. The second thing is just like making sure we launch all these major features like lending, streaming swaps, savers, limit orders, memoless transactions, like all these things, get those things shipped as well within the course of the next year. And make sure that when the market goes goes bull, and the next bull market, that we are already well positioned to handle huge quantity of volumes and integrated with so many places that we become a fundamental pillar of infrastructure across the entire ecosystem of cryptocurrency. How's that?
Oh, sounds good. It's a lot of information. I just, I'm like, oh no, I gotta store that in my brain.
Yeah, it took me a couple weeks to fully understand what THORChain was and like how it worked and everything like that. But it's pretty cool. It's just a decentralized, centralized exchange. You swap native assets and do other things with it. So it's super interesting if you take the time to actually check it out, or not. Like or you can just do whatever. So have fun, man.
Thank you.
Check it out in Trust Wallet or THORSwap or Shapeshift or some interface. Just make a swap. You can trade Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's like you can't get better than that.
It's pretty beautiful, and you can do it cheaper than any place else in the world, which is pretty crazy to say.
Cool. Khan, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
How's it going, bud?
So a few minutes ago, you were talking about adding, basically how you think about adding new chains.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious on how you guys think of removing chains too.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing I have in mind that I would like to kind of discuss is perhaps it's early, but as you guys might be aware, Circle is basically going to do native USDC swaps across chains.
Mm-hmm.
It already started, and there's some meaningful traction there. So I think USDC bridges kind of NGMI.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if there's any what's your initial thoughts there?
Yeah. Okay. So the first question was how we think about removing chains, right? I think that was your first question.
Right.
So we had a brief conversation, some of the devs, about the idea of removing Binance Smart Chain just because it hasn't had the adoption that we would like to see, and it's a very expensive chain for node operators to operate, and so it's just at this point it's not producing enough in fees to make make it worthwhile. But one of the things that the community should be aware of is that just adding a chain by itself is not the final step in the process. Once it's actually added, that's just one of the first steps. And after that point, just trying to get that ecosystem, like Trust Wallet is one of the biggest wallets within Binance Smart Chain, for example. So getting them to do Binance Smart Chain, add liquidities and swaps and trading to see how that affects it, and actually make some more like reach out to Binance themselves and ask them if they're willing to help add liquidity, or maybe do some cross marketing, whatever it is, and like try to get all that doing. So that's something that specifically Nine Realms is going to be working on over the next few weeks or so, to see if we can kind of foster a more better relationship with them. But in the event that doesn't, let's assume that doesn't happen and everything kind of stays the way it is, then like we may have a conversation with the community as a whole at some point saying that this chain, for example, Binance Smart Chain, has not been trading very much. It's very expensive for operators. Is this something that we want to keep, right? And maybe the answer is yes, and maybe the answer is no. But in the end, the node operators have to make that decision. So we'll probably put it to vote, and they'll vote in one direction or the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does make sense. On the second one, the USDC Circle bridge, right? So just for some context, basically, like with this Circle's CCTP, basically how the flow happens is that USDC. So it's like a very not a user-facing application. It runs on the back end, and applications can integrate it. And if you're an application that integrates it, when user sends you some native USDC on a source chain, you can have Circle attest to that. And once you have their attestations, you can mint native USDC on a destination chain. So Circle has some chains where it supports this functionality. I believe Avalanche, Ethereum, and Arbitrum are those chains. And yeah, so that's that. Like, what are the advantages? Basically, like, there's no liquidity pool, so you don't have to incentivize that.
Right.
So what happened in a number of bridges is that instead of like them spending fees and inflationary rewards to incentivize liquidity pools, they kind of redirect that to other pools, and so it's like a better use of their tokens.
Right.
So yeah, I admittedly I haven't spent too much time on how THORChain should address this, or how should THORChain position itself here.
Yep.
But yeah, curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, in general, I like what they're doing. This is a much better way of bridging specifically USDC across bridges. It's better to do it this way than like layer zero approach, right? Because it's you're already, the fact that you're dealing with this asset means that you're already exposed to that asset's whims or whatever direction it wants to do, or limitations that are being placed on it. And so by avoiding the added exposure or risk profile of another protocol on top of that is probably just a good thing. This only actually really works for USDC because it is a centralized stablecoin to begin with. And so you're not really giving up decentralization to do this. You couldn't do this with like, Bitcoin or something like this, because that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. I think what's probably going to happen, like if I take a guess, is that like UIs such as THORSwap or other ones are going to integrate with this system as another pathway to move across chains. And so part of their swap kit, API is to say, hey, I want to move, asset A on chain A to asset B on chain B. And then the swap kit UI will just give you, here's 4 different pathways of accomplishing that task. Here's the one that we recommend most because it's the best, the most efficient execution. So, here you go, right? And I think it'd be smart for them to integrate with this system to give another option, another methodology of moving, USDC from one side to the other. So I don't think it changes the game for THORChain all that much, because in the end, we're going to want to connect Bitcoin and ETH, right? And USDC's bridge is never going to touch that. And that is our biggest money maker, and biggest volume comes to that anyway. But I do actually appreciate what they're doing. I think it's smart of them to do this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chad. I think it's going to be really good for DexAg specifically,
Right.
And especially now that USDC is our deepest stablecoin pool on THORChain. That's going to be super liquid and make it really easy to go to chains which we don't support natively, like Arbitrum or I don't know, literally anything that's supported Noble or just like wherever they're shipping USDC, it makes it so it'll be super easy to get from whatever's on THORChain to whatever other chain. So you can just go Bitcoin to USDC on THORChain and then dexag that USDC into any chain that they're connected to. And totally agree that it makes a lot of sense for them to do this. I also agree with UConn that they're probably going to give all the other USDC bridges a super hard time because they're the issuer. So it's like they're going to have they have every competitive advantage in the book for like just being able to give the best execution. Like they could shut down all the other like USDC bridges essentially if they wanted to. And I'm sure that's, I don't know whether that's part of their strategy or not, but like they have every advantage there. So I think they're going to really try to capitalize on that. And then, yeah, we're definitely in different lanes. So there's no like direct competition there because we do just totally different things. But like we definitely do have have some good common ground, being that we have so much USDC liquidity in comparison.
Yeah, I'd definitely be concerned if I was layer 0 right now because it's really just ripped into their game pretty.
Well, I'm thinking more like Axelar, whose like main purpose is USDC bridging, right? And they have their own wrapped USDC.
Yeah,
like,
but I think Axelar
if they wanted to shut that off, they could just they could literally shut it off.
Doesn't Axelar do a Bitcoin as well?
Not really. Almost all their volume is USDC. They're wrapped USDC.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was Bitcoin as well.
Not yet.
Ken, do you know what the fee is that Coinbase is charging for their bridge?
0.
0? Well, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, like basically applications can charge whatever they want on top, but like there's already some like hackathon projects that charge 0. So it's a race to the bottom. Basically, it'll be free.
It doesn't make sense for it to be free though, because it costs them money to do it. So
no, because it does increase their dominance in stable coin. So they're like they're competing against like USDT, like BUSD, right?
Right, but that's a Web 2 mentality of how to establish dominance, despite like getting a bunch of VCs to invest in you and then having them spend their money to be able to offer the service for free.
I mean, it doesn't mean it'll be free forever, but they're definitely going for like the approach of just like be absolutely everywhere, have everything settle in USDC.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, and they're pretty successful up to this point. Like that is like the USD of DeFi.
Right, and I kind of suspect like if this model becomes successful for them, they like manage to increase their supply due to this and outcompete the market. Like other fiat stable coins can also do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it'll be trivial for them to do so. So it's kind of reasonable to expect like this is where things are going.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see.
Now that I'm thinking about it, even like BitGo, they started doing this for wrap Bitcoin and things like that. It totally makes sense. Then it's like, yeah, you choose whatever chain you want to interact on, and then the central company is controlling that asset anyway. So it's like, why not just they control the bridge for their own asset, right? It totally makes sense. And luckily, we're completely oblique of that game, where it's like we do the assets that are not controlled by like a single company or entity.
Yeah, and obviously these bridges are not decentralized bridges; they're highly centralized and by design to be. So that's obviously the main big difference between our viewpoint and theirs. But then again, like if it's a centralized token to begin with, like USDC is, then it's perfectly fine to have a centralized bridge to some regard,
Yeah, exactly what I'm thinking. That's what I'm saying, that it would make total sense for like BitGo to do that, or anyone else that issues out like their own asset that they control. Like XRP could do that, like same exact thing, which I think they are to some extent with their own like side chains and things like that. But like I'm just saying, like any entity that controls like an asset like that, especially like bridges, they might as well just make be their own exporter,
right?
And Circle's got a huge advantage there. So I mean, it'll be like I do think it's just good for us because it just makes us be able to connect to more chains more easily for cheaper. So
Yeah.
sounds good to me.
Right. And I don't personally have a problem with it. But I obviously still believe in our viewpoint of like creating decentralized bridges. Although we're not a bridge, but decentralized methodologies of moving value between decentralized chains. Like that's kind of our bread and butter and what we do exceedingly well.
Nice. Thanks for sharing these. I agree with your takes. It all makes sense. If there are no like other questions at the moment, I'm kind of curious to hear more on memoless transactions and their benefit. I don't really quite get them.
Sure.
Like I understand them to a certain extent. I understand that you basically can write your intent on THORChain, and it kind of makes it easy for wallet integrations. But I'm like, yeah, especially curious on how and what's the value add exactly.
Right. So the value add is a couple things, but the main one is that I know this is something that THORChain Bull has talked publicly about creating a UI around this, and so you can go to some THORChain Bull swapui.com, whatever the hell that domain's going to be. And you can type in your intention, like I got some Bitcoin, I want to get some ETH, and I want this and this. You can kind of tell it what you want, and then it just gives you back a QR code. And then from that, you can just scan the QR code and send it off, and there's your trade right there. So being able to trade from any interface or any wallet without actually needing specific THORChain integration, like they all do today, which just expands our market, expands the number of wallets, the number of people, the amount of capital that can interact with THORChain. I think that's like that could see a good amount of value. I mean, even Chainflip itself as a protocol has always stated historically that they're one of their main value adds that you can trade with Chainflip without actually, having a wallet integration. You can do it from any wallet in the world, right? And they more or less have the same kind of feature. So for us, we just want to get this out the door in part because it's going to help increase trade volume, hopefully. And in some cases, it might even, be a stepping stone to allow UIs to have a quick and easy integration to start that you can do, in a weekend. And then once they're really happy with the experience, they can start like actually allowing more features like add liquidity and lending and this kind of stuff.
But some integrated interface still has to write that write a intent on THORChain, right?
Right.
Like, and then those other UIs wallets that don't have a THORChain integration would have to refer to that somehow.
Right. So you would go to some, like tcbwallet.com or something like this. It's not in a wallet. tcbswapui.com, whatever it is. You put it in what you're looking for. It would make a call to a backend server. The backend server would make a transaction on THORChain to save that memo, and then give you back to the user a QR code that you can just scan and send. And so there would be some sort of backend server in the back that actually like broadcasts a transaction and pays for the cost of that to register some memo on THORChain for your transaction to come through without needing to write a memo yourself on your transaction.
And in this flow, would user be going to the THORChain Bull website?
Yes.
And have their wallet?
Yeah, so you wouldn't even need to log into the website with your wallet. Do you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't even need to like have a Wallet Connect or one of those similar services. You could just go on your desktop computer, or it doesn't matter where, but just go on your desktop computer, go to the website, type in what you want to do. I want to swap Bitcoin, Ethereum, blah blah blah, and then it gives you a QR code, and your wallet's on your phone. You just scan the QR code, send it off. Very quick, very simple.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, the way I'm thinking about it is it should make using THORChain completely agnostic of whatever interface or wallet you're using. So you can go on like THORSwap, Shapeshift, THORChain Bull Swap, or just any THORChain interface. You just describe your intent. Swap this Bitcoin to Ether. This is my price limit. Blah blah. That the interface is what registers the memo for you for just like, for like a penny or two, it just registers it for you. And then it gives you that inbound address. You just copy and paste that, and then they copy and paste the exact amount to send. And then when you do that, it
all just
does
works.
whatever you to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can swap from Bitcoin Core or whatever. It doesn't matter.
And is the barcode do you imagine this whole working always with the barcode, or could there be other ways to reference that?
I mean, it could be any way you want. It doesn't have to be a barcode or a QR code. It can be anything. Yeah. I mean, I think the UI would give you if you want to just copy and paste it directly, you could do that too. But the QR code would be there just to make it, super quick and easy to implement, import it.
The QR code is just interesting because you can embed the address and the amount into the QR code. So then it's literally just like you just scan it and then you just press OK, and then it's like the transaction is sent and it's done. Or you could copy and paste the amount and the address, and you'd have to get those exactly right, obviously. But the QR code just makes it easier.
Yeah. Yeah, the other benefit of this feature, which I kind of like, which is secondary, but it's still pretty interesting, is that in some blockchains, like there's a limit of like how much memo you can actually fit. So in Bitcoin's case, it's like 80 bytes, and for like Monero, I think it's like 16 bytes or something. Or they're thinking about to change it to 16 bytes or something like this. And so you can actually remove memo entirely and just have a super long memo going from Bitcoin to Ethereum and be able to fit an arbitrarily long. Not arbitrarily, it's still like a maximum of like 250 characters, which is huge, as long as you reasonably could ever really want. And so you could utilize this feature to do all sorts of crazy things theoretically.
Yep.
Beyond the limits of the chain that you're interacting with.
Right, stuff like maybe DEX aggregation, but also other stuff, right?
Yeah, DEX aggregation.
Do a swap.
You can do custom refund addresses. You could do data pass-through. You can send arbitrary data to the contract you're interacting with on Ethereum. Send a bunch more data that way. Like it could be arbitrarily, as much as you want, more or less. Outside of, as long as it's under 250 characters. We put an artificial limit of 250 characters on these memo sizes. We can increase it to 300, like no problem. It's not that really big of a deal, but we just want to put some kind of reasonable limit on it.
Nice. I like it.
Yep. I think it's pretty big, and I think it'd be interesting to see how much that kind of UI is utilized over something like a THORSwap, which is like fully integrated from the ground up, and this UI that TCB's been talking about, like it would be just like either free or maybe like 1 basis point, fee instead of 30 basis points or 50 basis points. So you could have a much cleaner UI. And this UI, like if you do a certain way, like you can just build it in a weekend and like almost never touch it again. Like you never have to add new features or anything like this, or add more complexity. Like you can just code it just once, get it out the door, and like basically never touch it again, and it'll just continue to work. It has very little cost to like manage it from a dev perspective or operations perspective. It's partially why you can charge like 1 basis point fee or 0 basis point fee, because it has no cost to operate, or very little cost.
Cool, guys. All right, let's wrap it up. Good talking with you guys.
As always.
Thanks for coming on, guys. I will catch you next week.
All right, guys. Good chatting.
See you.